How does Susan B. Anthony distinguish her position from that of others in her speech after being convicted of voting? In this lesson, you will learn how an author distinguishes his position from others by analyzing his response to opposing viewpoints. Let's review. We've just started reading the speech after being convicted of voting. This speech was given in 1872 by Susan B. Anthony, a pioneer for women's rights and suffragist. Remember, she gave this stump speech in all 29 postal districts in Monroe County, New York, during the 1872 presidential election. Let's also review what we know about good readers. Good readers are always thinking about an author's purpose when reading. Explaining how the purpose is conveyed helps the reader to understand the text more deeply.
Today, we're going to be exploring our question about the purpose of Susan B. Anthony's speech using these 3 steps.
1. Reread the text and identify the author's purpose. 2. Ask, what can I infer about the position of others? And 3. Now ask, how does the author distinguish his position from that of others? Jot down your thinking. So our question asks us to look at how Anthony distinguishes her position from that of others. First, I need to identify the author's purpose. To do this, I'm going to begin at the beginning, rereading the first paragraph. Our first step is reread the text and identify the author's purpose. So we go back to our text. Often in persuasive writing, the purpose or claim is written right in the first paragraph, so that is where I'm going to begin rereading. I will read aloud and you can follow along. Remember, we are thinking about Anthony's purpose. I will highlight the text when I find evidence of this. Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election without having a lawful right to vote. It shall be my work this evening to prove to you that in thus voting, I not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizens' rights, guaranteed to me and all United States citizens by the national Constitution beyond the power of any state to deny. Here in the second sentence, Anthony clearly outlines what her work this evening will be, to prove she did not commit a crime. I can identify this as the purpose of her speech. Now that I have identified Anthony's purpose, my second step is to infer what others believe. So I go back to the text and think to myself, what can I infer about the position of others? I know infer means I'm going to have to figure it out or read between the lines of the text. It won't be spelled out for me. I'm going to have to do a bit of detective work here. I'm going to start with what I know so far. Here in the first paragraph it says, under indictment for the alleged crime. So I know that Anthony has been charged with a crime as she is under indictment. As I keep reading, I am reminded of her purpose. Anthony believes she did not commit this crime, as it is her purpose to prove this. Then, taking these 2 pieces of information, I can infer that other individuals or people have charged Anthony with a crime. I can also infer the following about the position of others. Those charging her must believe she has committed a crime. Now comes the tricky part. How does the author distinguish his position from that of others? In this case, we are going to think about how Anthony distinguishes her position from those who believe she has committed a crime. We need to start by rereading. You can read quietly in your head, looking for evidence of how she distinguishes her position from others. I am going to reread the first paragraph aloud. Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election without having a lawful right to vote. It shall be my work this evening to prove to you that in thus voting I not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizens' rights, guaranteed to me and all United States citizens by the national Constitution, beyond the power of any state to deny. In this paragraph, I found some evidence showing Anthony has a different position from others. In this sentence, Anthony indicates that states do not have the power to deny women the right to vote. This is in opposition of those who have charged her with a crime. Let's jot this down on our notes. Now that we jotted down our first note, let's go back to our text and keep reading to see what else we are able to find. I think I found some more evidence in the 5th paragraph. Anthony declares, "For any state to make sex a qualification is therefore a violation of the supreme law of the land." In this statement, Anthony has again distinguished or distanced her position from others. She believes that these states are in violation of the supreme law, the United States Constitution. This supports what we just found out about Anthony's belief that states cannot deny women the right to vote. Here is more evidence that Anthony's position is different from others, those charging her with the crime of voting. Let's go back to our notes and jot this down as well. So now we have two pieces of evidence where Anthony distinguishes her position from the position of others. Let's continue reading to see if we can find one more piece of evidence. In the last paragraph, Anthony makes one final attack against the state laws. She argues that the constitutions and laws of the several states is today null and void. By declaring laws null and void, Anthony is clearly stating her position is opposed to others. Let's jot this final idea down on our notes. Now I need to tackle the focus question. How does Anthony distinguish her position from that of others? I can go back to my notes to help me answer this question. We have the author's purpose, what others believe, and evidence of how Anthony distinguishes her position from that of others. I will use all these pieces in my final answer. Anthony explicitly states her purpose in the opening paragraph of her speech. She avows she did not commit a crime by voting. In the ensuing paragraphs, Anthony distinguishes her position from that of others, the states, and continues to do so throughout her speech. For example, she declares that any discrimination against women in state laws is null and void. Her statement is contrary to state laws in place and the beliefs held by many others at this time. Let's review our steps. 1. Reread the text and identify the author's purpose. 2. Ask, what can I infer about the position of others? And 3. Now ask, how does the author distinguish his position from that of others? Jot down your thinking. In this lesson, you have learned how an author distinguishes his position from others by analyzing his response to opposing viewpoints.